Doug Smith joins the podcast today, a multinational executive making an impact to people every day. I've had the opportunity to meet with Doug when he first joined Microsoft Canada, and immediately what stood out for me was his care, his ability to listen, learn, and build a culture of trust with his teams that he represents. I've also had the opportunity to listen to some of Doug's many educational talks to leaders on topics like diversity and inclusion and self-care. He continues to inspire the organization that he represents, but above and beyond that, make an impact to customers, to partners, and the overall ecosystem that he's responsible for at Microsoft. I've asked Doug to come on today to share a little bit about his story, to talk a little bit about what leadership means to him, and some of the learnings that he's had along the way. Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Super excited to have you.
Thanks, Rashawn. So excited to be a part of this with you. And thanks for all those accolades. I'm not sure they're all deserving, but I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, your humility is very, very admirable. And you carry some really large and senior roles in your career with a lot of people, a lot of customers, large businesses that you're responsible for. And before I get into some of those roles, right, I'd love to talk a little bit about the early days, like how you started and how you transitioned into the role that you're in today.
Well, my first role at Microsoft 29 years ago was a TCP/IP developer in a product group that we had called Microsoft LAN Manager. It's a product that we bought from 3Com, and at the time, Microsoft had bridged-based protocols. NetBEUI was one of them. And so we were moving into the routed protocol space. And I was working in Washington, D.C. as a defense contractor doing DARPANET work, so TCP/IP stuff. And Microsoft was interested in me because of my TCP/IP background. I was interested in Microsoft because they were small 8,000 person company at the time and projected to do some pretty cool things. And so I started as a developer working in a team of incredible developers. I realized that if I wanted to stay in this company and be successful, it probably needed to be in something other than development. Good developer, working with great developers. I loved the customer interactions that I had, even though my code wasn't the best code in the world. But it gave me lots of reasons to interact with other customers that were having problems with that code. And I got the opportunity to move into Microsoft Consulting Services, working with networking and help customers implement solutions on our networking software. And that was the start of my journey. And to this day, every job I've had since then has had some customer components to it that was tied to their successful usage of our stuff. And what's really cool is this was many years ago, but now think about the business that we're in today. Usage and consumption being really the pinnacle of what we want. We don't want customers buying things and then not getting value out of them. And so usage and consumption, it's tied into our compensation. It's tied into the way that we organize the business. The CSU being the largest part of the field organization today mimics that. And so just really, really cool. It's coincidental in some ways, but it's a really cool part of what I think has been this long journey for Microsoft, and certainly for me in my career. And I love the connection back to customer success way before customer success unit existed. And I think even though I'm in the stew and leading the stew today, I see all of our job in the company and in the field as the success of the customer. And so finding ways to do that, I think, are really, really important. But anyway, a little bit about the history and how it ties to current day.
Well, first things first, let me congratulate you on a remarkable journey for that long of a time in an organization that has rapidly grown, and you've been doing some really special and cool things. I love that you highlighted there the problem resolving element, just in terms of supporting customers and supporting success along the way. In addition to that, being in a position now where we're measured with it as well, right? But then you've also transitioned into some really cool leadership roles in addition to supporting customers, carrying that responsibility for large amounts of teams and people made up of all different backgrounds, covering different regions, very diverse teams. Like maybe share with me a little bit about, those early days and how you've transitioned into some of those senior roles. Did you have to establish a brand, a platform for yourself, or did you just demonstrate results and resolving problems for customers like you've described?
Yeah, fabulous question. The thing that I will share, I'm going to out myself a little bit here, but the thing that I will share is that I've never really had this well-structured career plan with milestones and stepping stones to get from one place to another. And I've always looked at people that have and said, geez, I need to do that. I need more structure. I need more of a plan. And I'm not saying that I wasn't planful. Of course, I was, thinking about my career and planning it. I did actual career plans along the way, but I always felt like I needed it to be more formal. And one of the things that I've learned is that you don't always need it to be more formal. For people that are more structured or have I'll call it a more narrow path. In other words, they know what they want. They are on that journey to get what they want, and it's more linear, kind of traditional career path. You can have a more formal path, right? It's clearer where you're going. For somebody like me that was technical, and then I moved into a field-based technical role, but then I shifted horizontally and did a pure sales non-technical role. Then I went back into a technical capacity, and then I went back into sales, and I did an international assignment. Like, I was sometimes vertically advancing my career, so that taking your boss's job or moving up. Sometimes I was moving horizontally and taking a different subject matter. And I would say that helped to broaden me and deepen me. And I think that the ideal career path is one where you do both. You do some vertical and some horizontal. So think of it kind of like a stair step. And timing is everything, as I'm sure you and all of the listeners are aware. And so you can't predict when this stuff is going to happen. When is the vertical thing going to happen? When is the horizontal thing going to happen? You can never predict that. You can plan for it. You can be ready for it, but you can't predict it. And so this is why I think, this is my theory anyway, this might be me justifying my informal nature, but I do believe there's some truth to the fact that you can't always predict. And so you should be ready for it. You should be ready for the vertical when and if that presents itself. You should be ready for the horizontal when and if that presents itself. And you should be ready to accept the unknown if things happen out of sequence from what you're planning. And so I do think that this is important, right? This agility in career development is a really important piece. And one of the things that I did early on, I started really figuring out what I liked and what I didn't like about my role and past roles. And so this became my North Star. Like, I knew things that I didn't like, and that would steer me away from stuff that I probably wouldn't be successful at.
Nice.
And then I knew that generally what the things were that I did like, and that would steer me toward the things that I did like. And so you get into this mode of being able to, at least from a binary perspective, falls into the category of yes or no. Do I like this? Is this something I should pursue or not? And as simple as that is, it's a really powerful tool set. And so I would say that. And then the last thing I'll share is, I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but I cannot highlight it enough. The most important thing that anybody can do to advance their career is to do a great job in their current job. And while this is common sense, and this is something that we talk about regularly, I don't think that we put enough emphasis on it. And this is a hallmark of success. And I know this is not just a Microsoft thing, but doing a great job in your current job it's paramount. It's really, really important. And the best way to do that is to think about all of your roles, each of our own roles, in 3 phases. The first phase that you're in is the phase where you're learning your role. And this is where you're not great at your role, but that's okay. You're in phase one, you're learning your role. And embrace that. That learning is some of the best stuff that you will get. Then the second phase is when you're doing your role, right? And you're achieving it, you're having results, you're having success. And that's that part where you really start to feel comfortable and have significant impact. And then the third phase is when you're excelling in your role and you're working beyond your role. And I'm using the term phase here, not years, because people go through these phases in different times. Some people are super fast. I'm a little slower. My phases tend to be a year or more in a phase. But the key is to get all three phases. And what I see often is that people will clip that third phase too short. And this is really important not to do that, because that third phase, it's not just where you're excelling and working beyond role. It's where you're picking up skills beyond your role. It's where you pick up the things that that allow you to move horizontally. It's where that curiosity in your career can really blossom. And so if you're moving too fast and you're clipping off or removing altogether that third phase, you're missing out on some pretty cool career development stuff. And so anyway, just some thoughts that I have to go along with my informal career management approach.
So much in there, Doug. I want to talk a little bit about leadership, but before I get into leadership, I just want to double click on a couple of things that you've just described,
cool,
right?
Cool.
Just in terms of your informal plan. You've moved across different regions. You've been in EMEA, you've been in the US, and now you're responsible for the Canadian sub. Like, talk to me a little bit about the planning that went into that. Was it just an element of being ready and then taking on, and that falling into the category of things that you do like versus the things that you didn't like? And then talk to me a little bit about that type of adaptability and transition when moving into those different regions.
Yes. So I think the thing that stands out to me the most, a learning that I had that I learned quite painfully that I'll share, is so I went and took a role in EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa time zone for Microsoft, leading an Azure Global Black Belt team, so emerging technology. Great role, amazing experience for me professionally, amazing experience for my family personally. And we lived in London, but I had an EMEA role, so I got to travel all across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I had said at least 5 years prior to getting this role that I wanted an international assignment. Right? I talked to my wife. My wife is Canadian, and we wanted to have this international experience. And so I would say this as part of my career discussions with my manager, with my mentors, and it got years into this. Hey, I was really interested in an international assignment, but it felt like I kept introducing this comment with zero results or progress. And I had this one-on-one 4 years in to wanting this path, and I said, well, let me share with you. This was with, I was on a skip level one-on-one. I said, I'll share with you my interests, but I've shared this so many times and I've had almost no success here. And I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what I need to be doing. And this leader said to me, Doug, it's really difficult to help you if you can't be more specific. And he said, let me be specific. I don't know what country you want to live in or not. I don't know what jobs you want. I don't even know what organizations in the company that you're thinking about. And so you're basically saying you want to go to another country and do something at some part of Microsoft. This is really, really difficult for someone to help you with that because you're not specific enough. And this was a magical moment. And so I immediately said, okay, like I get it. Like and I have shared this comment with so many people. And so it really does work. And while you will think that you're narrowing the options, even while I was doing this, I was thinking this. I'm narrowing the options. I don't want to narrow the options. I want to have a lot of options because I want this to happen.
Right.
And so, it's natural to think, well, if I have more options, the chances of me landing one of those options is higher.
Right.
No. This is a counterintuitive thing. And the counterintuitive thing is you need to narrow in order to increase your options because people can't help you. And so this was like magic. Within a year of me narrowing, I had real conversations about real jobs. And while there was a couple that didn't work out, more because I was an American who speaks and at the time only spoke one language, English. And while English is a good language, if you can only speak one language, it wasn't helping me for an EMEA job. And so there was a lot of limitations that I had. And there was local talent in market, even at Microsoft, or I should say, especially at Microsoft, that were much more qualified. And so it became more challenging for me. And so what I ended up doing was getting connected to a role in the organization that I was already a part of, getting connected to a job that I brought a lot of skills to, leveraging the fact that I was having some pretty cool Azure scale experience in the US that I realized was highly valuable to EMEA, that was not as advanced on the cloud front. And so I just aligned around the expertise that was valuable, which offset the gaps that I had in my experience. And so that's the other part of this that I wanted to share, is that find the things that make you unique, and that will help you to overcome some of the transition barriers, like not being from the country or having language skills that you need, or whatever the skill is. And so when you figure those things out, narrow and get pointy so people can help you, and really try to align in a way that you bring value from your experience, things will open up for you, and it becomes much easier.
It sounds to me like you really exercised your strengths and your uniqueness to help you build the trust within the organization and rally a team around you to believe in the vision that you were trying to establish for success. You also said something interesting there, that at the time you only spoke one language. What's the other language that you speak now, or the other languages that you speak now?
I did say that. You're right, and I definitely misspoke. I can do greetings in so many languages, and I can bang my way around Spanish a bit. And what I learned, though, is that while language skills are absolutely important, cultural agility is equally important. And I always considered myself as being very culturally curious, and also more culturally aware. And not that I had awareness of all these cultures, but that I had a true, genuine desire and interest in cultures, even cultures that were very, very different, or especially cultures that are very different. And that became incredibly valuable to me. And I learned a ton as well. And that first year, traveling across EMEA, I learned how much I didn't know. I learned, I made so many mistakes in meetings, in front of customers. And but I also learned that if you owned up to them and you apologized, and you expressed intent and true desire, and you brought a humbleness to your approach, and we're just open with people, that this is universal. Humbleness, care, and the ability to create trust between people, showing intent and bringing, true honesty to conversations, it transforms conversations and ultimately relationships, and it cuts across cultures. It will move across just about any culture, and that's a savior. That was a savior for me, but it's a really powerful thing to learn, and I think to leverage.
That's so well said, Doug. Cultural agility, right? And just that unanimousness amongst all human beings, just in terms of communication, trust, and care, and empathy, and just relationships, right? It's so important. And I love the way you described it. I'm going to ask you a very intentionally loaded question about leadership. What does leadership mean to you?
So I will start by something that I share regularly with people. You don't need a position in order to lead.
Right.
You don't need to be a formal organizational solid line manager, second line manager, third line manager, etc., in order to lead. In fact, I would say it is easier to lead when you've got the organizational hierarchy than it is when you don't. It's easier when you have the position of authority because you've got the organization structure and authority behind you. It's harder to do it as an individual, or it's harder to do it across teams where you don't have that hierarchical authority. But it's arguably even more important then to do it. And so leadership to me isn't about a role. It's not about an organizational structure. It's about a true intent to provide insight, guidance, to make decisions, to influence decisions, and to have the opportunity to stand up for what you believe in, especially in moments where you might be either alone or in the minority on a topic that's really important, and that minority position needs to be heard. And leadership matters most when that leadership is needed the most, and it's typically also in times when it's the most difficult to deliver. And so this is what leadership means to me. It is standing up for what you believe in when that is needed the most, and that's often when it's the hardest. And but we see such powerful examples, especially in these days and times when we're still in the midst of this pandemic, and while there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel, it's a very, very difficult time. And this difficulty is where we see this big separation. You see the best of people emerge during challenging times, and you see the worst of people emerge. And leadership is about that best part and bringing that best part forward. And we've seen so much of that during this past year, and it's been just absolutely amazing.
Someone in your role, right? Transitioning from your definition of leadership there, someone in your role, when you get into a leadership keynote or into a conference, it's very easy for you to talk a little bit about the business, about the portfolio, about customer transformation, digital transformation, cloud. I mean, there's a plethora of topics that you could talk about. I've had the opportunity to sit in on some of these keynotes that you've done. You've intentionally, it seems like, prioritized diversity and inclusion and self-care. Tell me a little bit about what's behind that and why is it so important to prioritize that?
I think that one of the cool things about Microsoft is that we put such an emphasis on diversity, and we put such an emphasis on inclusion. And while we say diversity and inclusion, D and I, a lot, and we put them together, they're two very, very different things. And so I will speak about them as individual things. On the diversity front, we know the common dialogue that we bring the best of what we have to offer the world, our customers, our partners, if we represent the whole spectrum of the world. Like if we represent that at Microsoft, we will best bring the value that stuff has to offer. We know that. We talk about that. We don't always do it. We always aspire to do it, but we don't always do it. But if we can represent that, then we can bring the best that we have to offer. And the best way to do that is to represent that diversity in our actual people. If we can have a workforce that represents the full power of that diverse community, we can represent the things that, that fall into bias and unconscious bias, and we can self-heal. We can understand the challenges that we face and overcome those challenges. And so this is a really important aspect. I think the key here is we have to believe that representing that full diversity is better outcomes for everything, even though it can be harder and often is harder. I think we have to believe that. And so that's a really strong position that I've heard from so many leaders that are really conscious of this, and something that I think is really powerful. Then on the other side, inclusiveness, a very different topic, but equally important. And the thing that stands out for me, and I've heard some just amazing speakers talk about this, being authentic and bringing your true authentic self, regardless of who you are and what that authentic self looks like, is such a powerful element to inclusiveness. When you can do that, the impact that any individual can have when they're truly bringing their authentic self is orders of magnitude stronger than in constrained environments, than in environments where people aren't comfortable. And I mean, think about when you can be your authentic self, you don't have to think about who you are and what message you want to deliver. You can move with a pace and a speed and a natural cadence that allows you to bring much more effective and enabling kind of work that you wouldn't normally have if you're second guessing every step that you put forward, or worse, if you're not bringing forward your ideas and your insights and your perspectives. But if you bring forward your true authentic self, your ability to have impact and to shape others, it gets back to that leadership comment. This is the thing that I think will really create an environment where everyone is enriched by that authenticity. And it also creates an environment where people enjoy and create passion for what they're doing in a way that passion gets aligned to the work, and then that work gets enabled by the passion, and then you get into that flywheel where work stops looking so much like work and it looks a whole lot more like the cool things that you want to do with your life, not just your job. And you get into this cycle of being able to have impact on a whole nother level. And I know I'm sharing some aspirational kind of comments here, but I've seen it. We've all seen it. We don't see it enough, but we've all seen what that looks like. We've also felt it. And this is the magical thing when you can get it, when you can get the culture right, you can live it, in a way that you can recognize where we've failed in a respectful way so that we can improve. When you get to that point, this is where all the good stuff lives. And it is the thing that makes not just organizations more productive and effective. It certainly does that, but it makes people better. It makes people better people. It makes, the lives that we live richer. It allows us to do things that we never would have originally assumed that we could do. And that to me is I think that's why we're all here. And we don't always achieve this, but it's very, very inspiring to think about having this opportunity. And there are a lot of places that don't have the kind of culture that Microsoft does. And it's one of the reasons that I'm in this company and have been in this company for so long, is that it's an amazing place. We don't always get it right. Satya talks about the lived experience isn't always like the aspirational experience. But we're working at it. We're working at it every day, and that's that's why I'm here. That's why I think a lot of people are here, and it's amazing.
Being your authentic self is one thing, right? But creating the space for everyone else to be their authentic selves is another thing, and being intentional about it is so crucial. I remember in the early days when you and I had a one-on-one, I so distinctly remember the first conversation we've had where you really created the space for me. You literally like asked me my family's names, like everything about me, and you wrote them down, and you just created that moment for me, and you had me, like you literally had me, right? And just in terms of me being myself with you and being comfortable with you, right? So it was a really cool space. And it's really amazing for me to hear you say this because I watch you live it, I watch you execute on it, right? And so I just wanted to share that with you and give you a massive kudos to that. You know, this really, when you talk about diversity and inclusion, it really stands and it really overlaps as well with what you were saying from a leadership perspective, just in terms of being in the hierarchy, but standing up for what you believe in and standing up for what is right. Oftentimes, when you take that type of approach and you stand up for what is right and do it for so long and be so consistent with it, there's failures that pop up along the way. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how do you deal with failures and how do you continue to plug forward and keep that consistent approach on standing up for what is right?
I love this question, and in part because I don't think we talk about this enough, right? This is learning. Think about learning, like true learning. I'm not talking about scoring, right? Growth mindset is about learning, not about scoring. Our school systems are still set up to do a lot of scoring. And I think that's an incorrect way to achieve learning. But I think when I think about learning, it is a series, an ongoing series of failures, right? And you learn the most from times when you get it wrong or when you don't get it completely right. These are the learnings that stick with us. And so first, I'll just say that failure is such a powerful learning vehicle. There is statistics that show that there is a significantly larger chance of learning that occurs through failure than through success. And so we should celebrate this more. We should talk about this more. And so I like this topic. For me, I can think specifically. I'll share one experience around failure. As a manager of people and a leader of people, some of my biggest successes have been around people leadership and development, helping people to grow and develop and seeing them take on other things. We use this term exporting talent, hopefully not out of the company, but out of our own organizations and into other roles and other parts of the company, and magic happens. Like you see people that can just blossom. I have had a lot of those experiences, and they've been magical. They are the things that I will probably remember most about my time here. But to your question, I have gained some skills that have come through some hard knocks. And one of the things that I failed at early on that has stuck with me is not being as open and honest with somebody on an area or areas where they can improve their performance, and not being direct enough. And I don't mean being mean or aggressive. It's none of that. It's not being direct enough. In a way is not caring. And I've used this analogy before. I have 3 children, and nobody cares more about the development of an individual than a parent does for their child, right? And anybody, even someone that's not a parent, has a parent. So as being both a child or a parent or both, what this is like, right? And so, but think about a parent's role. A parent's role is to help guide the child. It is most important when that guidance involves failure or the need to correct behavior or change behavior or make improvements, right? And so I think about times when I have gone into my child's bedroom to have that really hard but important conversation about something that they didn't do so well, right? Especially if it deals with a value that, I can't believe my kid did this thing. Where did they learn this from? But when you go into that conversation as a parent, all you're thinking is, how do I have this conversation, maintain the clarity, provide the guidance, be firm, and use really firm language, and be caring, right? It's and be caring, not but be caring. And think about that setting, right? Nobody cares more about the development of that child than the parent, and yet the
Right.
parent has to be direct. And so, back to your question, I have let people down in the past by not being direct enough, by not being clear enough. And it's not something that you do without caring. It's something you do with caring. And so those connections that you make between, it's okay to be direct and firm and also care. Like, you can tie those things together. And so single most important failure, and it's happened a number of times for me, is that one. And and I sit here and tell you, Rashawn, that I don't know that I still get it all the way right. In fact, I'm confident I don't always get it right. But it is the learning that I think is the most important, and the applying that learning going forward so that you improve. And so that would be my single biggest.
That's amazing. It's so well put. Thank you so much. I know we're coming up on time, and what an excellent place to leave it. I gotta tell you, what really stands out for me is just your overall characteristics, the care, the intentionality, the curiosity, the empathy, and above and beyond that, the humility that you have as a leader really, really, really shines. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm certain it's going to be very valuable for everyone listening and watching. So, bottom of my heart, thank you, Doug.
Thanks for the opportunity, and I really appreciate you taking the time to bring insights to others. It is absolutely a powerful way to have impact, and it's cool. It's cool to be a part of it with you, and I just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Doug. Thank you.